I'm Cheryl Littlejohn, and this is Franklin Boulevard Media. My story starts on the block, 1207 North York Street in Gastonia, North Carolina, right across the street from the House of Prayer. And so many of probably your listeners and all of your audience, they're familiar with North York Street. And I've spent probably 5 years there. The most important thing that I remember about North York Street was Mr. Wright, high-stepping Mr. Wright. He was like that drum major, high-stepping older gentleman that got that, I'm gonna say this, that had the positive vibes, that had that band, that had that House of Prayer band coming down York Street. And everybody loved the horns from the House of Prayer. But you just remember this older gentleman, high-stepping, and he was excited about leading this band. And as a child, 4 or 5 years old, we used to just sit on the steps because we were right across the street and watch Sweet Daddy McCullough ride into town, and it was a parade coming down York Street. And that was the excitement that all of us, Miss Etha, Mr., oh my goodness, you look at all, Miss Whitworth, the whole block was a family. That was the real village back in the day that took care of each other. And my father was a police officer in Gastonia. And so for me, it was like, I'm gonna be honest with you, I just had an awesome childhood. And even after we left York Street, of course, that I'm gonna go straight to where everybody know, Radio Street, Barclay Street. And so we moved. And I just remember awesome times, even on Barclay Street. And people talk about Section 8 housing. Let me tell you, when you're a child and when you get food, clothing, and shelter, and everything you need, I didn't realize we were broke. I didn't realize people say, well, you was born in poverty. Let me tell you, my grandmother, Lula Mae Davis Smith, taught us that we were not poor. She didn't even allow us to say the word poor. She was like, baby, we just broke, because whatever broke can be fixed. And it's up to you to fix it. And so all of those little tidbits growing up in Gastonia and having a village, Miss O'Neill, just all of the old timers that are not here. And now I'm an old timer. In that house was my sister, Deborah Littlejohn, Kearns now, Spencer Littlejohn. James Spencer Littlejohn was my father. My aunt used to call him Jimmy. And my mother, Dolores Littlejohn. And so we talking about a 2-bedroom house on York Street. And our restroom was outside on the back porch. We didn't have a washing machine and dryer. My mom used to just take clothes and, had a wash pot. And so for us, we didn't realize, we just thought that was normal because everybody else was washing clothes the same way you were washing clothes. We had a clothesline. We had a dog called Brownie. I was terrified of that dog. That's probably why I don't like dogs now. And so for me, my mother was a disciplinarian. Everybody knew my mama. I'm telling you, Dolores Littlejohn didn't play. My grandmother was that enthusiastic person that loved to cook. And so that's why right now we have Smith's Soul Food Bistro. My grandmother grew up cooking for everybody, the public service company, cooking for the mayor, cooking for all the churches in our community. My mom had a grocery and grill, Smitty's Grocery and Grill in Green Circle Drive. And so even as a child, I'm gonna be honest with you, I didn't like playing basketball, but it's something that all my friends was doing. So at middle school, Howland Junior High, go Rams. 7th grade, start playing basketball. And if I just tell you, when I say the all-star team in our community, when you got a person like Kathy Tate, Dina Tate, Constance Tate, Carmen Tate, Audrey James, Karen Robinson, Cheryl Littlejohn, all of us was on the same team in junior high. We were killing everybody. I mean, if you really think about it, Howland was I would say, the harvesting place. And I'm gonna say this, when Dina Tate, all of the Tate sisters, I mean, really, that's the whole basketball team in itself. You got Dina, you got Kathy, you got Carmen and Constant. It didn't matter who else they had. That's 4 starters. I went to Hunter Huss. So I went with Jackie Anderson. I went with Karen Robinson, Shelton Kennington. So we still had 2 strong teams, but all of us went to the same middle school. It was junior high back then. But we beat Ashbrook every time we played them. Ashbrook had weapons. It was the Tate sisters. When we split, the Tate sisters went to Ashbrook, and all of us, the rest of us, went to Hunter Huss. And so you still had 2 dominant teams. And I would say this, not because the talent is different, but when I played, and I'll say this, our whole entire starting 5 went to Division I. We all got scholarships, plus 3 people coming off the bench. When I say we were loaded, and I'm talking Division I scholarships, every last one of us got a scholarship. And the amazing thing is because other college coaches are going to come see you. And so when they came to see me play, well, guess what? We got a starting, everybody on the starting team was awesome. And then people coming off the bench, they still went and got scholarships. And so for me, I didn't love playing. I liked playing, but I was the tallest person on the team. And even then we had Jackie Anderson. I dare not forget her as well. And so for me, it was just something that all my friends was doing. And so I just kind of did it. And I knew my mom wanted me to stay out of trouble. So for me, I'm probably 6'1" in the 7th grade, tall for my age. But it was something for me to do. Transition to high school, you go to Hunter Huss High School, go Huskies. And I continued to play. And one of the things that my grandmother would say, your mom cannot afford for you. I just never forget her saying this. She can't afford for you to go off to college. So you better keep playing that damn basketball. And it's amazing because my grandmother worked for Marsha Rauch at some point. And it was amazing because everybody that she worked for, and I just want young people to understand this. My grandmother had a 3rd grade education. She was the best networking woman that I knew. And she'd always say, Cheryl, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And so for us, she exposed us to a lot of great people here in Gaston County. And I just never forget going to public service company and I'm washing dishes. And my grandmother was catering for the Salvation Army, all of the big churches. And at that point, public service company was like the country club. Everybody went there because there was no conference center. There was none of these hotels that had venues. And so that place was where all of the big wigs went to public service company, Charlie E. Ziegler. And so working down there, my sister, my brother, all of us used to pitch in. Now, we said this after my grandmother passed away. Social service would come and lock my grandmother up because we were working to 1 o'clock at night when we were in school to help my grandmother, but we earned the value of just saving money, work ethic. And it's amazing that I look at 40 years have passed and I'm the owner of a Smith Soul Food Bistro. It was already there. Come full circle. And so I have to be honest, is when I say it all started at a public service company, because all of the people that came to parties, they would always tip my grandmother. And my grandmother would be so proud of her grandkids, and she would always be talking about, Cheryl playing basketball. Her mother can't afford to send her off to basketball camps. So all my basketball camps were paid for with all of the people who came to public service company. And I never forget Milledgeville, Georgia. I'm down at the BC All-Star Camp. And Kay Yao was there, Pat Summitt was there, all of the coaches in the country was there. And my first letter came when I was in a junior in high school at Hunter Huss High School. My coach, Edie Saywich, and we still had an all-star squad. And I never forget that summer when I came back and she said, Cheryl, you got over 200 letters from colleges. And so my mom was like, I said, Mom, I get 5 visits. And my mom, typical Cheryl Littlejohn fashion, she said, well, I'm not the one that's going to college. And she said, you smart enough. She said, look, the one thing about you, and I know you have discernment in people who just trying to get over, trying to tell you what you want to hear. She said, you're going to know the place where you fit in. And she was correct. My mom absolutely fell in love with Notre Dame. Now I'm going to tell you. But it wasn't the Notre Dame women's basketball coach, because Digger Phelps would call my mama every morning trying to recruit for Notre Dame women's basketball. I took a trip to Notre Dame, absolutely had a ball. I come back home, my mom says, now I love Digger Phelps. But she was like, well, you're not going to play for the men's team? She said, now you very seldom talk about the women's coach, but you love Digger Phelps. So Notre Dame was out of the picture. I went to Florida State, and I tell all my friends, as soon as I got off the plane, I knew I was not going to Florida State. It was something in the air. Went to Old Dominion, and Old Dominion back then was a powerhouse. And Mary Ann Stanley and Barbara Thaxton were the coaches. And I never forget, like 2 of my teammates that eventually ended up at Tennessee are still on the visit with me at Old Dominion. We had a ball, but again, I knew when I left Old Dominion, I wasn't going there. Went to Penn State when they played Tennessee, and I'll never forget it. It was snowing. I was scared to death because I was on this little propeller plane flying into College Station, and the radio announcer from Tennessee was on the plane. And he was like, baby, you're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. He kept holding my hand. He said, you're going to be okay. He said, but I tell you what, you got to come to Tennessee. So I visited Tennessee. Bob Kessling is the gentleman's name. And I had an amazing visit. And you know, everybody knows Pat Summitt was going to be the Olympic coach in 1988. I graduated in 87. And you know, that's the name, the household name you heard about was Pat Summitt. She's going to be the 1988 Olympic coach. And so my mom was like, look, that woman is tough. You need somebody like that. That woman is not promising you the world. She talked hard work. Well, guess what? My mom, she talked hard work. So for me, it was an easy transition. And the 4 years was just like I was at home, because I remember incidents. Now, Pat and I collided a lot. And she would call my mom. My mom would call me, and I'm going to say this, and you know, I'm glad and proud to say it now. My mom would call me and say, look, that woman, and she wouldn't even call her Pat. She said, that woman called me today. And she told me that you up there now, you a leader, but you can either lead people to heaven or to hell. She said, but if she called me one more time because you don't know how to keep your mouth shut, she said, I'm walking in Knoxville, Tennessee. And you know when I come up there, Cheryl, you already know I'm whooping your ass. And trust me, my mama was a woman of her word. And so for me, it was the relationship that I had with my coach, because my mom was the same way. My mom told me, she said, that woman wants you to be successful. And I remember 2 of my teammates that quit. We started out with 5 freshmen. 2 of them quit. And I remember when it got tough, literally, my senior year, I just called my mom and I said, I can't do it. I said, I'm quitting. We up here running on the track. I didn't sign no track scholarship. I signed a basketball scholarship. My mother hung up the phone on me. I called her back and she said, let me tell you something. That woman is successful. And one day you want to be, if she asks you what bridge to jump off, you better ask her which one in Knoxville you going to jump off of. And so I knew my mother was not going to deter from the discipline. Everybody knows about Pat Summitt, but to even be on a national championship team, honestly, like right now, it hits me now more than anything. And even when I graduated, I got it once I graduated and we won, because Pat called me and she said, Cheryl, I know the next couple of weeks at the FBAT in Quantico is going to be tough. And I stopped her and I said, you know what? I played for you for 4 years and did not quit. And I mean this even today. I said, life is going to be easy. It's because when you play at Tennessee, the expectation is nothing but excellence. And it's hard work, it's grind, and it's no excuses, and it's getting it done, and it's teamwork. And so she's going to expose all of the selfishness, all of it, and she's going to make you a better person. But you have to be willing and to be coachable. So after I graduated, every team goes to the White House. We went to the White House. I met some awesome people, FBI agents, Secret Service agents, and they approached me. They said, you know what, Coach Summitt said, you interested in federal law enforcement? Yes, ma'am. Put some manners in your mouth, number one, as my mother would call it. 3 weeks later, I was at the FBI Academy training. They did my background check within 2 weeks. That's unheard of. And I know that's the favor of God. And so after, 6 to 12 weeks in Quantico, Virginia, at the FBI Academy, I walk across another stage. They give you your credentials, and I am an investigator with DEA. I didn't even want to go overseas. I did not even want to go. That right there it's like 4 years of the Pathead Summitt Academy, I call it, the championship, that DNA Academy. I was done. But I knew that I was ready to be successful in life because I felt like I had all of the tools that I had gained. Work ethic, number one, and having the right attitude. And so now it's, okay, FBI Academy, did that 4 years. Now, during my 4 years in Los Angeles, met the most incredible people who are still friends of mine from DEA, FBI, Secret Service. Now, imagine you in federal law enforcement. I had no prior history in coaching or anything, and you get a call. And my coach at Tennessee said, Cheryl, the job at NC State's open. You always wanted to coach. You love young people. Kay Yao is gonna call you. This right here is alert number one. My grandmother told me it's not what you know, it's who you know. She didn't say, Cheryl, she's calling you to interview. She said, she's calling you because the number one assistant's job is available. And so I knew when I flew to Raleigh, I had the job. You ain't going to interview. When Pat Summitt makes a call, you got the job. It was awesome. 4 years working for KYAL. I recruited some of the best, and some of them are still in. Chastity Melvin that played, got the all-time leading scoring record at NC State. But 4 years at NC State, traveling around the world, and I tell people all the time, I'm traveling on somebody else's dime, getting to see the country. And I never forget it. Coach Yao said, Cheryl, there's a young lady that's over in Israel. She really wants to be a Wolfpack woman. During the Persian Gulf War, nobody else wanted to go to the Holy Lands. And I'm like, what? You sign me up. I'm going. Coach Yao said, Cheryl, you don't mind? Nope, not at all. I'm good. Went to the Holy Lands, got to see this young lady, work out. But people who are Christians always want to go to the Holy Lands. And so for me, I got to do that working at NC State. So lo and behold, my next job was, I'm in the home of Tiffany Johnson. Her mom and her are looking at me kind of strange because, during the summer, you get to know a lot of people. And they knew that my best friend was Dottie Kelso because Alabama was recruiting Tiffany Johnson. And she said, oh, I am so sorry. And I was like, what? And she looked at me and her mom looked at me. She said, you don't even know. And I was like, she said, Cheryl, now this is on a Saturday. She said, during the Alabama football game, they announced that Dottie Kelso passed away. And be praying for the Alabama women's basketball team. I'm telling you, when I say, that shook your whole foundation to find out that your best friend had an aneurysm. We left that in-home visit. I finished out the season at NC State. But when I say things come full circle, Alabama women's basketball team went to the Final Four that year. And the head coach, Rick Moody, who is still one of my dear friends to this day, called me. And he said, I have not been able to wrap my head around who I'm going to hire. And all he said to me, he said, Dottie Kelso absolutely loves you. And if she loves you that much, we are going to learn to love you. He offered me the job. I didn't even have to go on a visit. University of Alabama. I left from NC State. The next job was the University of Alabama. The #1 recruiter, assistant coach. Both jobs. #1 recruiter at NC State, same at Alabama. Went to Alabama, had an awesome career, 4 years. We went to the Sweet 16. I recruited #1 players in the country, signed a #1 JUCO player in the country 2 years in a row. And again, my coach calls me at Tennessee, Cheryl, the head coaching job at Minnesota is open. Yeah, And you could imagine, like, Minnesota? First of all, you know how we think. I'm like, ain't no black folk in Minnesota. But for me, it's like, am I ready? Hindsight, I probably wouldn't. But you get an opportunity and you take it and you go for it. I'm still that same little girl from 1207 North York Street, Minnesota, 4 years. I'm helping kids. I never, revealed who, and don't even really want to say the young lady's name, but, she had a baby. And I helped her to get food stamps. I helped her mom to get in rehab. And a lot of people, oh, sure. And I did. I put my job and I put a lot of my assistant coaches' jobs in jeopardy because my heart got in the way of what was right. And I never forget this when I got fired. And I tell people this. I thank God for my mother because my mother never took up for me. Never. She said, Cheryl, did you know the rules? Now, your mom could be real sarcastic. She said, now I'm going to tell you this. She said, I don't know about coaching. She said, but you're the best social worker I know. You love kids. You're going to do whatever it takes to help kids. And so from Minnesota, 20 days later, I got a head coaching job at Chicago State University. And I tell people, I know favor, and I know the difference between favor and blessings. And I know when God has favored you in your life to do certain things. And so now it is, okay, well, when you don't learn, guess what? You doomed to make the same mistakes. And that's exactly what I did. Same thing at Chicago State. I'm still helping kids, still breaking rules. And guess what? Same thing gonna happen. So when I got fired in Chicago, I stayed in Chicago all winter long. And so my mom told me, she said, I wish somebody would call you for another coaching job. She said, no, you need to find something that you can do to help young people, and you are not going to get fired. And so the amazing thing is when you come back home, and this is a place that I really never wanted to come back to. So I'm being, transparent. And my sister tells me all the time, she said, I never thought that you would stay. And so for me, coming back home was but I'm glad I did. My grandmother, my mom, and my brother and our aunt since have passed. And so when you look at coming back home, and I tell people, when I came back to Gastonia, honestly, I felt like a failure. And people say, well, why? You have all of the grandiose ideas of how your life is going to go. And when things don't work out, it's like, wow. For me, I know I disappointed my mom. And I disappointed myself and my coach and probably my family. And so how do you gather all of that back up. And the only thing that I tell people is, I know who I am. And I know who I believe in. And so for anybody that have had setbacks in their life, trust me, you can bounce back from anything. Because I'm sitting here today. I am so grateful. And I'm going to go to just the last 2 months. I'm going to fast forward. And I'm here to tell people, when God got you, you don't have to worry about nobody liking you, nobody voting for you, anybody. Restaurant Impossible called us in August when I was going through some tough times, and I thought it was a prank call. And you have to be in business 3 to 5 years to even qualify for a renovation, a transformation. And when Chef Robert Irvine from the Food Network came to Gastonia, he said, all I know, he said, I'm not trying to be spiritual. I'm not trying to talk to you about who you believe in. He said, but we know it's God. He said, because you did not qualify. And I tell people, even when you don't qualify, let God qualify you. We got over a $200,000 renovation at our restaurant and did not have to pay a dime. He was there for 3 days. And even when he left, he said, you still have no idea what's coming. And when I tell you, he said, but do not lower the expectations for people who are working for you. He said to me, you are not Salvation Army. He said, your coach, you got to go back to what you do. You played for a woman who expected the best out of you. And so when I tell you, even adults need a pep talk, he had to remind me of where I came from, who I played for, who my mother was, who my grandmother was, and say, look, this next rebound that you're going through, this transformation, he told me, had nothing to do with a restaurant. He told me this has to do with Cheryl Littlejohn. He said, and I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that I'm here on a divine assignment. So when you have somebody to walk into your life and spend 3 days with you, and they tell you this transformation is about you. It's about you changing. Do not lower the standards. Do not lower the expectations for even people that you're helping in poverty. He said, but remember who you are and step up your game and get back to coaching. Get back to helping people, but showing them the right way. There's no more breaking rules. And so for me, I needed to hear that word. And because it set me in a motion that now, if they didn't get me then, trust me, they can't get me now. Because I got a new attitude. And it's this. I'm 58. And I know I got a lot more living to do. But one thing that I do know is we're on a block in Gastonia, North Carolina, to help people. You giving them hope. You giving them encouragement. But our program, Developing Champions for Life, is just that. Even adults need some foundation. Right now, Gastonia, North Carolina, is on the cusp of explosion. And it's an explosion in economic development. It's an explosion in opportunities for entrepreneurs to do what they are doing. And I'm sitting in a studio of a man that's just doing that. And this used to be my home of executive coaching enterprises. So I feel good in this space And so people who are looking for opportunity and want to take chances on themselves, I tell them, when you go to work every day, an employer is rolling their dice and they betting on you to do the right thing to help their business grow. But for those entrepreneurs, and I will say this, roll the dice on yourself. You know your work ethic, you know your value. Roll the dice on yourself. I had people who believed in me, believed in what I was doing, but they said, Cheryl, you need to open up your own business. And so I'm excited about where Gastonia is going. I'm excited about where Smith's Soul Food Bistro and Legacy Event Center and Executive Coaching Enterprises is going. But most important, I'm excited about community. Community that is helping one another. Community that loves one another. Community that will step to your child. That village concept has to come back. When we see people that are not moving in the right direction, it's okay to say, come on, young man, let me talk to you. That's the village. We got to get back to the village concept, help one another out, and just love people. And I'm going to say this, we got to love all people. But most importantly, you got to love yourself first. If you don't love yourself, you can't love anybody else. So I'm grateful, I am appreciative for the opportunity to share on Franklin Boulevard Media.